Welcome. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. This is a hybrid program of the Spartanburg County Public Library System. My name is Charity Rouse. I'm the Director of Local History for the libraries. We are glad to have people from all around the U.S. joining us tonight live. This is being recorded for the library's YouTube channel, so please make sure you check for previous programs, as well as if you happen to miss one of our series, you can find the very large bulk of what we do recorded online. So tonight we're going to be talking about vital records, finding and using vital records for genealogy, why they're important, all of that good stuff. But first, let's look at what are vital records. So these are the state-issued records or locality-issued records for birth, marriage, divorce, death, and adoption is included in my list, but know that adoption runs by very different rules. But it is a vital record for that person being adopted, that usually child. Because that is the record of name change, that is the record of the family unit of adoption. But each state has different guidelines about when these documents become public information. Most states, not all, restrict birth records for between 100 and 125 years from the time of birth. Marriages may be public the day they're filed, like in South Carolina, or after 25 years, Virginia, other states, the privacy restriction varies. Death records may be public after 25 years in Virginia, 50 years in South Carolina, 75 years in Georgia, and there are probably some that do the 100-year rule for deaths as well. Divorce records are typically available only in the county where the divorce occurred, but sometimes they're available on the state level. We'll talk a little bit more about those. Some states do have copies of these records available from the State Department of Vital Statistics. Your name may change, but usually if you Google vital records, name of state, and then look for the official state site .gov, or .va, or whatever the state uses as their official domain name, you can find what is available in that particular state. Okay, so what exactly are these vital records in a little more detail? They are the official state or locality certificate verifying a life event. They can generally date from the early part of the 20th century to the present. There are exceptions to this. The further into the Northeast United States that you get, the earlier you are going to find these records. In places like Great Britain, you are going to find Government Record Office, GRO records of life events going much further back. In New England, there are some towns and localities, townships that have records going back into the 1600s. The further south, and then as movement went west, those records are going to begin later. In fact, some records in the farther west predate records in the southeast because we just didn't keep the records here in South Carolina as early as some other places. They are the legal record of birth, marriage, death, divorce, or adoption. And they are a public record, but privacy restrictions may limit access. Time periods. So most states mandated statewide reporting of life events in the early portion of the 20th century. So sometime typically between about 1910 and about 1920, but I've seen some a little bit earlier, some a little bit later. But most of the states I've looked at, it's somewhere in that 1910s. As I said, some places have it completely earlier. Sometimes it's localities have it earlier, and statewide happens in the early 20th century. South Carolina started statewide reporting of marriages in 1911, July of 1911. And you have to request marriage records through the county prior to 1950 and after December of 2022. I think that's on your handout. And I didn't get this updated on this slide. Births and deaths began being recorded in 1915, 1 year late for my grandfather. And divorce when it became legal. So we had 2 periods where divorce was legal in South Carolina, 1872 to 1878, and again in 1949. So Reconstruction was good for a number of things, but then 1949 is kind of late for divorces to become legal, but South Carolina, not an early adopter of a whole lot of things. As I said, adoption records are vital records, but they work on a completely different setup. And so they must be requested from the court which handled the adoption. Amended birth certificates may be available from DHEC for adoptees, but that's going to be, again, a special application. And there are limits to who can actually request the adoption records. It's literally the person or the parents. It's not other family members or whatever. There are legal processes that have to happen, and it may not be cheap. So how do you get vital records? Generally speaking, you have to go to the vital records office in the state where the event happened. If it's the time period before state record keeping, then you go to the locality where that license or event was registered, county, township, parish in Louisiana. So you have to go to the local level. You may find that there are state-sponsored websites like the Secretary of State's in Missouri, and I'll show an example from that in a moment. Ancestry.com or Ancestry Library Edition has many, including Virginia. FamilySearch.org has other states, different states partnered with different of the large genealogy companies to and entities, organizations to provide access to their data. So you'll have to do some exploring to find out which states you're looking for and which records where they decided to keep those records and make them accessible. Some states partner with VitalCheck or other online services for rush services in particular. So instead of waiting 9 weeks, you might be able to get something in about 10 days. But just be prepared. You're going to pay a rush fee, plus you're going to pay a fee for VitalCheck on top of the fee for the record. So depends on how urgently you need this record. Most of us don't need things that quickly unless we're just impatient. So, specifically about South Carolina records and finding them, let's take a look. So, SCDHEC, Department of Health and Environmental Control. Each state names this a little bit differently, but as I said, Google vital records, name of state, and then in the results, look for the .gov or the state domain name. They have, in the orange bar there at the top of the screenshot, they announced, hey, there's a fee increase to $17 in October of 2023 for a 10-day turnaround. Now you can still get the $12 however many weeks thing, and if you want to do an online application for it, then you're going to have to pay VitalCheck for the online services, which is like another $18, and the rush fee and the. So again, It depends on why you need the record. If you need it to get your driver's license renewed and your driver's license expires in a week, then you might want to do the rush. Actually, you might want to do the rush and go in person. So just depends. Within the Vital Records site, they have, hey, if you know what you're looking for, you can click on birth, marriage, death, etc. And then if you scroll down, it tells you get vital records. The bottom of that left-hand column, you'll see death indexes genealogy. I realize that print is painfully small. It's the best I could do on that screenshot. And you do have to, in many cases, provide confirmation that you are who you say you are. So read all of the information and make sure that you're sending everything you need to send in with your check. If you're mailing it in, you may have to mail copies. If you're walking in, you have to have these documents ready to show, ready to hand in. The form is there, fill in the form before you walk in the door. That way you can more quickly do your transaction. So, mentioned adoptions. South Carolina passed this law about adult adoptees being able to get a copy of their original birth certificate. Yeah. If you read through the rest of the statement, it only applies to adoptions finalized after July 1st, 2019, where the biological parents have signed a release saying, yeah, they can get it when they turn 18. So, various states have extremely different rules about adoption records. And so you're just going to have to do that one on a state-by-state basis. Some make it easier on adult adoptees, some don't. Missouri, I believe, just opened up for adult adoptees over the age of 55, something like that, about 2-3 years ago, to be able to get their information. So it's helping. There's been a lot of advocacy for that. But again, those adoptions after July 1st through 2019, at 18 years, we won't see any of these records for a while, but at least there's progress. So, beyond the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, there are some local records that people need to be aware of. Our library system in the Kennedy Room has South Carolina death certificates on microfilm for 1915 to 1972. We are in the process of ordering 1973. It's that 50-year rolling release, and then they've got to turn them over from DHEC to the archives. The archives has got to sort them and microfilm them. And then we have to be able to purchase the microfilm, and it just takes a little bit. But give us about another month and a half, 2 months, and we should have those in hand. And as I said, those locality records, the city of Spartanburg did maintain limited birth registers between September, and we have some that survived, not all of them survived, September 13th, 1895 to September 31st, 1897, October 9th, 1903 through December 20th, 1903, and November 2nd, 1909 to December 31st, 1914 survive of the births. Death registers, some similar dates survive. So it's just one of those things where it never hurts to ask on the local level if there are surviving records outside of the parameters of what the state records show. You may find some things on Ancestry.com. There are collections. I did a Google for in the card catalog. Under search, go to the card catalog and title South Carolina, keyword birth, and got a whole bunch of stuff. So there's South Carolina delayed birth records from 1766 to 1900, City of Charleston, South Carolina birth records 1877 to 1901, compiled marriage index 1641 to 1965, death records 1821 to 1968, and many others. And so one big reminder of this is not all counties participated in these larger collections. Ancestry couldn't get their hands on Spartanburg County for the most part, among other counties. So always scroll down to the bottom, read the collection description, which will tell you what is in or not in the collection. Because, hey, 1766, delayed birth records. Yeah, that's going to be really few and far between for that time period. And when you're depending on all of the little shaky green leaves on the various research sites like Ancestry, if you have a tree on Ancestry, Family Search does a little bit of this too. Now, these collections are not in the top 300 or however many that get hints. So you do want to do some selective searching if you're not finding the records that you think should be there. And, oh, look, there is this collection that should cover this person in the time period in the location where they should have been. So do targeted search. The card catalog is your friend. And I don't say that just because I'm a librarian, but I'm a librarian. The card catalog is your friend. So the death certificates we do have on microfilm on that 50-year rolling from 1915 to 1972. Birth certificates on the 100-year rolling did not start being released until 2016. And the Department of Archives and History for South Carolina has chosen not to microfilm those records, but release them as digital-only records. They are only available on the South Carolina Electronic Records Archive, SCERA, S-C-E-R-A, through the Department of Archives and History website. Look for online resources, genealogy, and you can get to SCERA and then choose birth certificates. Now that we've got, 6 years, 7 years, I guess, they have started doing a combined index. For the first while, it was only a year-by-year index. You do find amended and delayed birth certificates in this, because people in 1915 didn't always realize, oh, I was supposed to register that. It was a new thing. People didn't always get all of the news because they did not have, news archive in their hand, in their cell phone. And how many things do we miss because we have too much news coming at us that we don't know something has become the rule. So they do have birth certificates from 1915 to 1922. And it's a little clunky, but hey, you can find the stuff. So I randomly chose a 1915 for our Rouse, Henry Franklin Rouse, who, as far as I know, is no relation to me. But, I like to use that surname just because it's not Smith. Now I have Smiths in my line. But, it's kind of fun to research other Rouses because there aren't that many of us. But you'll see that this is an affidavit certificate, which means you're going to want to look at the back. Always look at the next page, just in case. Because this one has an affidavit from the parent saying, hey, this is what this was. This is when my child was born, that kind of information. So always check the back. This is a South Carolina marriage register. So this is a county level resource from Allendale County in 1937. This is from Ancestry Library Edition. And so you see that it is a clerk's register of marriages, and it gives a lot of different information for all of the couples, kind of in order of date of marriage, or at least date of license issued. And it gives you, who officiated and when it was returned and where each of the parties lived and their ages and that kind of thing. So it's not a specific certificate, but it is a vital record because it is the official county record of those marriages. And there's a Rouse on there somewhere. Now, a marriage license is going to be a different thing. It's going to be a certificate looking thing. And what you are hoping for with this is you get the affidavit to attain the license. This is who I am. I say that I am of age. I say that this is where I live. Sometimes you get parents' names, sometimes you don't. And then you get the license at the bottom of the right-hand page. Willie Rouse is getting married to Emma, I can't read Emma's Wedgers in Augusta, Georgia, or of Augusta, Georgia, getting married in Edgefield County. So also do check the neighboring jurisdictions because they might have different requirements for marriage than your state. I have a number of people. I have great aunt and uncle who came to South Carolina from Virginia to get married because there were different requirements in Virginia than South Carolina. I had another great aunt and uncle who got married in Maryland. They just jumped across that line from the Eastern Shore of Virginia. And then you get the certificate that whoever officiated said, yep, I did the wedding. They're married, returning it. It is legal from the time it is filed. So make sure that if you're doing those forms, make sure they do get filed. And that is a 1940 example. South Carolina death certificate. This is an early period one. They started in 1915. This is 1918 for my second great grandfather, John J. Rouse. And it tells you a number of things. They forgot to write the place of death, presumably somewhere near Latta in Dillon County. But that whole upper left just didn't get filled in. Oops. I mean, granted, he was the secretary treasurer of the town of Latta, so I don't know if he was the one who would have been filling the information in. Who knows? But, it gives you the various information somewhat reliably. And you depend on handwriting on these. But parents born in South Carolina, his daughter was giving the information. But it gives cause of death, which can be helpful to know. Divorces. I have yet to actually see a South Carolina divorce certificate because I don't have a legitimate reason to go down to the courthouse and ask for one. But anyway, however, South Carolina did legalize divorce from 1872 to 1878. I'm also looking for one of those. And I'm told about 157 divorces were issued statewide during that period. And then again on the 15th of April, 1949. A lot of places you'll see 1950 as the date that divorces became legal, but the governor signed it into law on April 15th, 1949. I had to pull the old code of laws for 1949 off the shelf to find that date. According to the Spartanburg Herald newspaper on the 3rd of January, 1950, they said, well, divorce suits total 191 here in year. So between April 15th and December 31st, there were 191 divorces issued in Spartanburg County. And then they also say that there were 1,736 marriages licenses issued in 1949. And so these records can be gotten through the court. You just have to go and you have to pay the fee and you have to do the things. Now, this is a little hint for next month's program on obituaries, newspapers, and other treasures you can find in the newspaper. But if you are not positive where a divorce was granted, you may be able to find a listing in the newspaper for the court. So Spartanburg Journal, Friday, January 13th, 1950, it lists that there were 3 decrees for divorce filed here. And it names 3 divorce decrees were filed Thursday at the county courthouse. And the plaintiffs, defendants, grounds, and judges granting the decrees follow. Edna Joan Hatcher Waddell versus Tommy E. Waddell, physical cruelty, Judge G. Badger Baker. And then the other 2. And so it's just one of those things where you might get the clue you need from a legal listing. You'll also find marriage licenses listed. I had a situation with someone in another state where they got married in 1930 whatever, and in that state, and in 1960 whatever in the neighboring state, because he wasn't altogether divorced, so that the first marriage wasn't altogether legal. And so when they applied for Social Security, they had to actually get remarried so she would be able to claim Social Security under his, because she had been a housewife. And not only did they have to get married again, which they went over to the neighboring county in another state thinking that would give them enough privacy, they got outed in the newspaper by a listing of the following couples from this county received marriage licenses from the bordering county in the other state last week. And it was apparently a little bit of an embarrassment at the time. Their descendant thinks it's hysterical. So, and explains a whole lot about that side of the family. You never know what you might find and the clues that you might find, newspaper and court records. So, as an example of a divorce, this is Virginia divorce number 1 in 1918. I have no idea who these people are. And this is from Ancestry. So, but it does say husband and wife full names, residence if known, hers is unknown, date of marriage, place of marriage, and that she deserted him, and that they were married for a bunch of years. So, good information to know, because that can also tell you where to look for that marriage record, which may tell you the parents' names. Divorce records don't usually tell you the parents' names, but they do usually tell you previous married names for women. So, some other places and other resources, including state databases, Family Search. So Family Search has Texas death records from 1890 to 1976, among many other state records. And so you're going to want to, again, search their catalog and look for the location. Check county level, check state level, check their Family Search wiki, and for the state, and it should tell you for divorces, marriage, birth, death, it would tell you where to find that information, whether it's on Family Search or not. Their wiki is fantastic. This is for a distant cousin, and Thomas Allen Goad. Unfortunately, it was an accidental death by bullet wound at a neighbor's house, 5 years old. Lock up your guns, pretty please. If you have them, make sure they are safe. And I mean, this was in, so about 1930. Death was in 1931, March of 1931. So, but you can search those records on Family Search. Again, oh, this is the actual record itself in Dallas County. And so cause of death, you can sometimes learn a heck of a lot. So I did mention Secretary of State's office in Missouri, West Virginia, and a number of other states have digital heritage sites that include listings of births, marriages, deaths, what eras and what you get, whether you get an index, whether you get the certificates, varies. But Mississippi and West Virginia in particular have put a lot of effort into these sites in recent years, whereas Virginia partnered with Ancestry and their index goes up to 2014, and they are supposed to be rolling the newer released records into the online database. Still waiting for the 1997 ones, death certificates to roll online. So it just depends, and Ancestry is big, and they may be doing batches of a number of years at a time on adding to the Virginia records. But they're coming as long as the agreement holds up. But Missouri Digital Heritage has records available. This has been going through many Secretary of States now. I've had to update this screenshot at least 4 times for different secretaries of state since I've started giving vital records programming. So Charity, you've been talking about all of these vital records. And you've been saying, hey, here are these vital records. Well, why? Why do I need to look for them? What do these add to our genealogical endeavors? And how much do they cost? Well, it varies. But the information that these provide is fantastic because it is the confirmation of your ancestor in the legal record with the official dates of life events. It puts them in a specific place at a specific time, so you know where to look for additional information. It often gives information about the parents. And parents' names are always on the birth certificate, at least mama is. Dad is there if mama names him. They are usually on the death certificate. That will depend on the informant, unfortunately. So unknown is a legitimate answer, but hopefully it is correct, and hopefully it is a correct place as well. Sometimes on marriage certificates, sometimes not. It depends on the location and what questions they were asking at the time. So South Carolina in the 40s didn't ask about parents on the marriage certificate. Virginia, I think all the way through, asks about parents. And my dad was underage. He was only 20 when my parents got married. So I also have in my family files the letter of permission his aunt wrote for him, his guardian wrote for him, giving her permission for him to get the license underage, because 21 was the age of consent. My mother was 21, dad was not. So sometimes you can find information additionally if you know what the law is for what was required. So again, confirming locations as well. So cost. So when ordering vital record certificates from the state, go to their website, find the form, see all of the things. There will be a fee, typically between about $12 and $34 per record. And then additional processing if they use a service like Vital Check. Often you don't have to use Vital Check, but some are now requiring you to. So that's a third party vendor, so you have to pay their fee plus. Sometimes you have, if you want to put it on a credit card, they're going to charge you for the credit card fee as well. Now, I have seen at one point, I was helping a patron and it was somewhere in the upper Midwest, and I don't remember, and I couldn't find it as I was searching in the last couple of weeks off and on. But at one point, I was helping a patron, and up somewhere where it gets cold, upper United States, there was a $65 fee for a death certificate. And we decided we would find alternate records because she just didn't have a spare $65 sitting around to write off and hope that there was a death certificate in that location. So some states have much higher fees because they're trying to offset. Some of them have been challenged on those high fees and they've come back down. Technology has helped getting some of the older records where they are available online or more easily indexed online so that it's a much smoother process. Has helped reduce some of the cost, but it has added other costs. When you're ordering, you will have to send a copy of your identification, depending on generation, and you may have to prove the relationship to the person. In order for me to get my grandmother's birth certificate from Virginia before the 100 years from 1920, when she was born, I had to, with my check for, it was either $12 or $15. I sent it in, it got rejected because grandchildren were not eligible in the requirements to get a birth certificate under 100 years. I had to write a statement. And technically, I was supposed to have given them copies of all of these records, but I had to verify that she, her spouse, her parents, her siblings, and any children were deceased before I, as one of the two living people in the family, my brother being the other, and that he was fine with me getting the record. But I had to put dates, locations, certificate numbers for Virginia. One of them, Great Uncle Edward, died in Georgia. That's a 75-year restriction on death certificates. He died in the 70s. I may not live long enough to get his death certificate. So I couldn't provide that. So I just provided, we have an index, thank goodness. I provided all of the information from that Georgia index for the correct Edward Turner, of which there are a lot, so that I could then get the birth certificate. So sometimes you have to do some extra work. Sometimes it takes a phone call. I finally, because I got the rejection and I was like, okay, what do I need to do? And they're like, write a letter, give us all of this information. And so I did. I sent a new check in, I wrote it. But I worked really hard for that certificate. So, and I had to get, I think I had to do my birth certificate that named my father and my father's birth certificate that named his mother. So again, you're going to have to jump through the hoops because they write the rules. Actually, the legislatures write the rules and they can get really funky. So, as I indicated, only certain people can get copies of the restricted certificates. Usually, you can get your own. You can get those for a parent, a sibling, a spouse, a child, sometimes grandchild. Step relationships don't always count in this. They can get really black and white on these rules. So, hopefully the right person is still living and can get you the information you need. With my dad's mother, my father is deceased. He was an only child. Both of his parents well predeceased him. I mean, I'm closer than the first cousin with whom I was not in touch at that point. DNA test for the win. So sometimes you have to say, okay, how do we get around this? And then sometimes you just have to wait the 100 years out. Sometimes you can do that, sometimes you can't. So before spending money, do check local library resources in the locality near where they lived, where they might have gotten married. Doesn't help when they went 2 states away. Luckily, Ancestry has that marriage certificate for my great aunt and uncle who came straight down from Rockbridge County, Virginia into South Carolina and got married at the first courthouse there. Ancestry Library Edition or Ancestry.com, FamilySearch.org, state and county websites, because they may give you a hint or they may have indexes or information on their site. Again, it varies depending on county by county and court by court within the county. State archives and libraries may have state information that is in the public domain available, or they may have guidelines for where to find things. Like if you go to the Virginia Vital Records site, it will say the public records are available through Ancestry, click here. And if you are in Virginia, IP addresses in Virginia, it will automatically take you into the free part of Ancestry and it will be free. I'm not in Virginia, so luckily I was logged into Ancestry in a different tab and it got me in today to play around with that. But some of that is limited state by state as well. You may want to look at US GenWeb and other volunteer genealogy sites because random certificates have appeared in random places. US GenWeb is not as robust as it was 20 years ago, but some of the counties still have very active administrators for their site and have a fair amount of information. Other counties are up for adoption, so if you want to help a good cause of volunteer genealogy, that might be someplace to look. So, and then general resources. There are genealogy how-to books. In our library, they're at 929.1, which is the Dewey number for genealogy and how-to. And those can help you with specific states, specific types of records. The Red Book, the last physical one was published in 2003. I don't care. I still use it. I don't trust any of the contact information in it because I know the state of Kansas has changed all of their state web addresses twice since that book was published and a bunch of the phone numbers. But in the back of each, it is a state-by-state listing of states, resources that are available, when records started, a little bit of history, types of maps to be looking for, that kind of thing. And at the back, it has current counties listed, and it tells you when records started for that county, what the parent county or counties were, if there were successor counties from that county, those types of things, what dates you're looking at for various jurisdictions. So you may need to go back a couple of jurisdictions to find those marriage bonds in Virginia in the 1700s. They're likely to be there unless they were Episcopal, Anglican, in which case, good luck, because most of those records didn't survive. But if they were nonconformists, if they were the Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterians, etc., non-Anglican, non-Church of England, then likely they registered those marriages with the county court with a marriage bond, and those can be invaluable. I have a wonderful 1798 marriage bond for one of my Revolutionary War ancestors. The content is now online at the Ancestry.com learning area, which is not the easiest to use. Just saying. I've already given a shout out to the FamilySearch.org wiki. Their learning wiki is fantastic and can be very helpful when you're looking at a new area of information and research. And then there's a Researching in the States guide from the National Genealogical Society And then there are some other state guides, including DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, has published guides for most of the original 13 colonies, if not all of them now. They're working their way through. And that can be at least helpful for those states. But the New York Biographical and Genealogical Society, Genealogical and Biographical Society, GNB, has also done a big New York record book that tells you how to research. Name the county in New York, you go to the county, and it tells you in minute detail who to contact and that kind of thing. So it's fantastic. Various states are going to be different than others, but at the same time, these records are going to be extremely helpful. And they are going to be the governmental verifiable piece of paper that is the legal date. Now, are there mistakes in them? Yes. Sometimes they get the date wrong. Sometimes the informant gives the wrong birth date. Sometimes nobody can read the handwriting, and so something gets transcribed wrong. But overall, this is the legal form of identification that is used. Again, primarily birth, marriage, and death. 20th century records in a lot of places, but as I said, Virginia has marriage bonds from 1700s and some back further than that, depending on the county. And then also New England, you can get a lot more of those town clerk registers. So I've been chatting for a little bit here. I see a couple of comments here. Let's see, don't forget in the chat, there is a link for the handout, which just reiterates a lot of this information. So yes, okay. And we are glad that everybody has come. I know we have some folks from around the country with us. I hope it wasn't too South Carolina heavy, but it gives you the terminology and places to look in your own research. And you may be all researching South Carolina, because I research other states like Virginia regularly, because 3/4 of my family was in Virginia. The other quarter was down here in South Carolina. So are there questions, comments? Anybody find something really cool in vital records?
There's no questions yet, Charity, but I just wanted to say I really appreciate you putting up that one card that said places to look before you order certificates and things, because you can actually find those things. We've done it, you've done it, I've done it. And I think it's important that people know that there are other avenues to check out first before handing over $20 to $30 for a certificate.
Yeah. Well, and that one, yeah. I was going to say I could pop into one of my file folders, but unfortunately, I don't have one of the right ones up right now. But yeah, and you can find very interesting things. I'm in the midst of trying to figure out a marriage between my second great grandparents, where I can find him marrying, so Sterling marrying an Isabella, and I can find a Mary Clements marrying a Stephen Lawhorn, but I can't find Sterling and Mary getting married. But I have multiple death certificates of their children that say our parents were Sterling and Mary. And it would have been the marriages that I found were in 1860, 1861. And so I am operating under the assumption that Sterling and Stephen were brothers, still working on proving that. And that it's not a typo for Sterling and Stephen being the same person, which is what a lot of people have assumed. But it was in a time when Virginia was keeping marriage registers at the county level. And I cannot find the two of them later getting married. It may have ended up being a common law situation where the two spouses died. 1860s Civil War, a lot of death, a lot of illness and stuff was happening in the mountains of Virginia at that time. And but I need to be able to prove that the two of them got married. And so I've looked through the surviving records, and I've got to go through the remaining counties surrounding, because sometimes you don't get married in the county that you live in for whatever reason. So it just depends. So are there questions, comments? Please join us next month, the 5th of February. We'll talk more newspapers and obituaries and the society column and some things. I've got some really fun little tidbits from my family to share, as well as various newspaper databases to look for things in. It's an ever-changing lineup of who has what. And so we'll be happy to have you with us then. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next month. Hey, Cheryl, you can hit stop record.